Jeong Hayeon had never been the kind of woman who believed in the word soulmate. She was 30 years old, a pediatric nurse at Severance Hospital in Seoul, and she had seen enough of real life, the undeserved suffering, the random cruelty of illness, the way people held each other in the worst corridors of the worst days, to understand that life was not organized around destiny. It was organized around choices. Small ones, mostly. The choice to show up. The choice to stay. The choice to be honest when lying would have been easier in kinder and no one would have known the difference. She had made good choices for 30 years and had built, from them, a life that was modest and solid and entirely hers. A one-bedroom in Mapogu with bookshelves too full and a kitchen she actually cooked in. A job she went to with the specific, durable satisfaction of work that mattered. 3 friends she trusted. And, for the last 8 months, Kong-min. Kong-min was 33. He taught literature at a secondary school in Sinchon. He was not the most handsome man she had ever met, he had a wide, honest face and reading glasses he forgot on top of his head and a laugh that arrived without warning and was always genuine. He cooked badly and knew it and found it funny rather than embarrassing. He called when he said he would call. He showed up when he said he would show up. In a life that had contained men who did neither of these things, this had felt, at first, too simple to be real. She kept waiting for the complication. It didn't come. He had proposed 3 weeks ago. Not with theater, no restaurant, no audience, no anxiety performance. He had proposed on her kitchen floor on a Sunday morning while they were sorting out her overcrowded bookshelf, him sitting cross-legged with a stack of novels in his lap, her leaning against the wall with coffee, and he had simply looked at her and said, "I want this to be my Sunday morning for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" She had said yes before she finished hearing the sentence. The ring was in a small wooden box on her kitchen shelf, beside the plant she talked to. She looked at it every morning. She was not a woman who believed in soulmates. But she had started to believe in him. The first person Hayeon told was Yuna. Yuna had been her best friend since their first year of nursing school, 11 years of the same friendship, durable and tested and entirely without the kind of performance that exhausted Hayeon in other relationships. With Yuna, she had never needed to manage herself. She could be the version of herself that was tired, uncertain, occasionally petty, frequently anxious about nothing, and Yuna would receive all of it without revision and hand back honesty, always, even when the honesty was uncomfortable. She called her from the hospital stairwell on her lunch break, still in her scrubs, the ring photo already sent. Yuna's shriek was audible from 6 inches away from the phone. A passing orderly looked at Hayeon sideways. She turned to face the wall, laughing. "Tell me everything," Yuna said. "Kitchen floor proposal. That is so him. I know, right? I was in my oldest pajamas. That makes it better, not worse." They talked for 40 minutes. Hayeon was 12 minutes late back to her ward and her senior nurse raised an eyebrow and she mouthed sorry without looking sorry at all, which was a privilege she had earned in 7 years of never once being late. She and Yuna met that weekend at their usual cafe in Hongdae. Yuna had brought a small box of macarons, celebration macarons, she said, from the bakery near her apartment. She was warm and funny and asked all the right questions about Kong-min and the wedding and the future and whether Haeun's mother had been told yet. She was also, Hayeon would realize much later, asking questions whose answers she was filing somewhere other than friendship. But that was later. That Saturday, in the Hongdae Cafe, Yuna was her best friend of 11 years, and Hayeon was happy, and the macarons were good, and nothing was wrong with any of it. Hayeon had not wanted an engagement party. She was a private person by nature, she had said yes on her kitchen floor in her oldest pajamas, which was a statement about the kind of celebration she preferred. But Kongmin's mother had asked with the specific hopefulness of a woman who had been waiting a long time for this, and Hayeon had found she could not say no to that hope. It was a small gathering, both families, the closest friends, Yuna of course, 2 colleagues from the hospital. 30 people in Kongmin's parents' apartment in Mapo, a long table of food his mother had been making for 2 days. Hayeon stood beside Kongmin most of the evening, his hand in hers, watching the room with the specific warmth of a person who understands that they are inside a moment that will matter. Kangmin's father made a toast that made Kangmin's mother cry. Hayeon's mother gripped her hand and said nothing, which was more than anything she could have said. Yuna arrived late, 40 minutes, which was unusual. She was ordinarily precise about time. She came in bright and apologetic and a little breathless and hugged Hayeon immediately and whispered "You look so happy" in her ear. She did. She was. She noticed, somewhere in the second half of the evening, that Yuna and Kangmin spoke for a long time by the window. She noticed it the way you notice background music, registering it without attending to it, filing it under normal, friends talking, nothing. She did not pull it from the file and examine it until much later, when the file had grown too heavy to leave closed. She wasn't looking. That was the thing she needed people to understand. When she replayed it, she was not the kind of person who looked. She had never gone through a partner's phone. She believed in trust the way she believed in showing up, not as a passive thing, not as naivety, but as an active choice that you made every day because the alternative was a life lived in suspicion, which was no life at all. She found it because his phone was in her hand and a message arrived and the screen lit up before she could set it down and she saw the first line of it without choosing to. Last night was a mistake. We can't keep doing this. The name above the message, Yuna. She set the phone down on the kitchen counter. She stood very still. The ring was on her finger. The plant was on the windowsill. The bookshelf was behind her, the books still in the order they had sorted together on the floor on the Sunday he proposed. She picked the phone back up. She read the message again. One sentence. Last night was a mistake. We can't keep doing this. She put the phone down again. She sat on the kitchen floor, the same floor where he had proposed, where she had said yes before she finished hearing the sentence, and she sat there for a very long time in the morning quiet of her apartment, alone, and she let the sentence do what it was doing to her, because there was no other option. There was no one to call. The person she would have called was Yuna. She waited until he came home. She did not call him. She did not text. She sat in her apartment for 4 hours and she thought, carefully and thoroughly, about all the ways she might be misreading the message, and she exhausted all of them, and she was still sitting with "last night was a mistake, we can't keep doing this" when she heard his key in the door. He came in easy and warm, calling her name, carrying groceries. He had texted from the mart asking if they needed anything, the specific ordinary intimacy of a person embedded in your life. She had replied "we're fine" and the 2 words had felt like glass in her mouth. She held out his phone. Yuna messaged you this morning, she said. It came through while I was holding it. I didn't look for it. She needed him to know that. She needed the truth of her own innocence in this specific thing to be established, because everything else was about to become uncertain. He looked at the phone. He looked at her. She watched his face move through several things in the space of 5 seconds, shock, then calculation, and it was the calculation that broke the last of her hope, the half-second where she could see him thinking, choosing a version of the story, before he said. It's not what it looks like. 6 words. The most overused, hollow, desperate 6 words in the history of human betrayal. Tell me what it is, then, she said. He sat down. He put the groceries on the counter. He could not look at her for the first 30 seconds, which was also an answer. When he finally talked, it came out in pieces. 3 months, he said. 3 months that had started the night of a work dinner she hadn't attended because she had a late shift. Yuna had been there. It had, he used the same word Salman would have used, happened. 3 months. She did the math involuntarily. The engagement had been 8 months in. Which meant that for 3 of those 8 months, while she had been happy, the specific, earned, finally arrived happiness of a woman who had chosen carefully and trusted fully, he had been with her best friend. She did not shout. She did not break anything. She stood in her kitchen and she listened to all of it, and when he finished she said, very quietly. I need you to leave. She called Yuna an hour after Kangmin left. Not because she wanted to. Because she needed to hear it confirmed from the other side, needed to close the shape of the thing by having both people say it, because she was, at her core, a person who dealt in facts, and the fact was still somehow only half real until Yuna's voice said it too. Yuna picked up on the second ring. The silence after Hayeon said "I know" lasted 7 seconds. She counted. "Hayeon," Yuna started. "How long?" Another silence. 3 months. "While I was planning a wedding." "I know. While I was telling you," her voice held. "Just. While I was telling you about the ring. And the dress. And how happy I was." "You were, while I was telling you all of that." "I know," Yuna said. Quietly. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." 2 words, trying to carry something they were never built to hold. Hayeon thought about the macarons. The celebration macarons from the bakery near Yuna's apartment. Yuna sitting across the cafe table with her chin in her hand, warm and interested and asking all the right questions. She thought about 11 years. The nursing school bathroom. Every version of herself she had been with this woman in the room. "Did you love him?" she asked. A long pause. The honest pause of someone deciding between the kind answer and the true one. "I don't know," Yuna said. "I think I loved that he loved you. And I think that was the worst part of me. I think I wanted something that," she stopped. "I don't have an excuse." "There isn't one." "No," Hayeon said. "There isn't." She hung up. She sat in the silence of her apartment. All the bookshelves. The plant. The small wooden box with the ring, which she had taken off and placed on the counter and could not yet look at. 11 years. 3 months. The math of love and betrayal, the 2 numbers that would not reconcile. She was going to be fine. She knew this about herself with the same certainty she knew her own blood type. She was going to be fine. She was just not fine yet. She told no one. Not her mother, not her colleagues, not the one other friend she might have called. She went to work the next morning in fresh scrubs and she was good at her job, which meant she had somewhere to put herself that was not her apartment and not her own chest, which felt, for approximately 6 weeks, like it was being slowly compressed. She gave back the ring on a Tuesday. She had chosen Tuesday with no particular reason except that it was the most ordinary day of the week, and the act of returning a ring deserved the humiliation of ordinariness. Kangmin came to pick it up from her doorstep. She had left it in the wooden box in a paper bag. She was at work. She did not come to the door. He texted afterward, "Can we talk? I want to explain properly. I want to fix this." She read the message. She thought about the word fix. She thought about the man who had proposed on her kitchen floor in the specific language of someone who understood her, no theater, no audience, just 2 people on a floor with books. She thought about what it meant to be known that well by someone who was, simultaneously, doing what he was doing. That was the thing that kept surfacing in the nights, the question that sleep wouldn't answer. How do you love someone genuinely and betray them completely at the same time? Which one was real? Were both real? Could both be real? She was a nurse. She understood the body's capacity to hold contradictions, to be alive and dying, to be healing and deteriorating, to feel 2 things fully that cancelled each other out. She understood it clinically. She did not understand it when it happened to her heart. She replied to his message on a Saturday morning, 5 weeks later, "There is nothing to fix. Please stop texting." He stopped. She came on a Wednesday night, 8 weeks after the phone call. Hayeon saw her through the peephole and stood at the door for a long time without opening it. She opened it. Yuna looked, not well. She had the specific appearance of someone who had been losing sleep from the inside, which was different from tiredness. Her eyes were clear but her face was stripped down in the way faces are stripped when there is no performance left in them. She had a paper bag. Macarons from the bakery near her apartment. The same ones from the engagement cafe. "I know," she said, before Hayeon could speak. "I know I don't have the right. I know you didn't ask me to come. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me or to explain myself or to make this easier for me. She held out the bag. I came because in 11 years you have never needed someone to show up for you and not known how to ask, and I am the person who knows how to show up for you, and I know I forfeited that, I know that, her voice broke. First time in the 8 weeks. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. And I know that doesn't fix it. I just needed you to hear me say it to your face. Hayeon looked at her. The macarons were the same macarons. The face was the same face. 11 years was 11 years. She stepped back from the door. Sit down, she said. I'm not forgiving you tonight. I need you to understand that. I understand, Yuna said. But sit down. Yuna came in. She sat at the kitchen table. Hayeon made tea, the same way she had made it 100 times with this woman in this kitchen. Her hands moved from muscle memory. They sat with the tea and did not talk for a long time. And that silence, not comfortable, not resolved, not pretending to be either of those things, was the most honest thing that had passed between them in months. He came to the hospital. Not to find her, he was there for his nephew, a tonsillectomy, routine. She came around a corridor corner and they were simply there, in the same fluorescent hallway, 10 feet apart, the way life sometimes arranged its worst moments with complete indifference to your readiness. He saw her first. He stopped. She did not stop. She walked toward him at the same pace, measured, professional, the posture she wore in this building, and when she reached him she stopped because it would have been strange not to. Hey Anna, he said. How is your nephew, she said. Steady. Entirely herself. Fine. Good. He stopped. Looked at her. Something moved in his face, not asking for forgiveness, she saw, not angling for a conversation. Just looking. The way you look at something you have lost and understand the size of the loss in a way you perhaps did not when you were in the middle of making it happen. I want you to know, he said quietly, that I know what I gave up. I need you to know I know. She looked at him for a long moment. Kunmin SSI, she said. His name with the formal address, the distance she had decided. What you gave up was not a thing. It was a person. A pause. I hope the knowing does something useful for you. She walked on. She rounded the next corner and stopped for 10 seconds, hands at her sides, breathing. 10 seconds of allowing the weight of the hallway. Then she walked back to her ward. She had children who needed her. She went to Suwon on a Thursday. Not because she had decided to. Because she had woken up at 5 a.m. and lay in the silence of her apartment and felt, suddenly and completely, that she needed to be somewhere that predated everything, predated Kongmin, predated the ring, predated even Yuna, predated the entire architecture of the adult life she had built well and had still watched come apart. Her mother was in the kitchen when she arrived, not surprised in the way that mothers who know their children are never surprised. She looked at Hayeon's face and said nothing. She turned back to the stove and made a second portion of the doenjang jjigae she was already making. Hayeon sat at her mother's kitchen table, the table she had done homework at for 12 years, the table that had held every important conversation of her childhood, and she let herself be in a room where she was simply her mother's daughter. Before everything. Before the choice and the loss and the 8 weeks of professional competence applied to private devastation. She ate. Her mother sat across from her and ate too and said nothing about the ring that was not on her finger and nothing about the wedding that was not happening and nothing about the best friend whose name had not been said. When she had finished eating her mother refilled her bowl without asking. When the dishes were done, her mother came to sit beside her. She put her hand over Hayeon's hand on the table, her mother's hand, the hand that had held her through every hard thing, and she said. You don't have to be okay yet. Hayeon looked at her mother. I know, she said. And then, finally, properly, alone with the only person in the world to whom she had never needed to perform anything, she cried. Not the controlled, private, absorbing kind. The old, unlayered kind. The kind that came from the place in you that had not yet learned composure. Her mother held her hand and did not say a word, and outside the Suwon window the ordinary afternoon moved on without them. She wrote the letter in November. She wrote one to Kongmin and one to Yuna, and she wrote both of them by hand. She had always thought better by hand, the pace of pen forcing a different quality of thought than typing, something more honest, closer to what was actually in her. She did not write them to send. She wrote them to say, to finish the sentences she had not allowed herself in hallways and phone calls and kitchen silences where she had been too careful, too composed, too determined not to give her pain to anyone who had already taken enough. To Kongmin she wrote, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you are someone who was afraid of the size of what we had and chose something smaller because the size frightened you. I think you will understand this eventually. I think understanding it will cost you more than losing me did, and I think that cost will be the better teacher. I loved you honestly. I want you to know I have no regret about that. The loving was mine. What you did with it was yours. To Yuna she wrote more. She wrote for 4 pages, 11 years of a friendship rendered in the specific detail of a person who had paid close attention to another person for a long time. She wrote about the things she missed already. She wrote about the anger, the real anger, which she had not given a full voice to yet. She wrote about the macarons, the engagement cafe, the questions Yuna had asked with an attention that was also a kind of taking. She wrote, I don't know yet what we are now. I don't know if we are something or nothing. I know that 11 years does not simply become nothing because of 3 months. I also know that nothing becomes simple again. I am not ready to decide what I want from you. But I want you to know I am still deciding. That is not nothing. She folded both letters. She put them in the drawer of her bedside table. She slept better that night than she had in 3 months. They met on Mapo Bridge on a Sunday afternoon in December. Hayeon had suggested it. Not the bridge for its history, she had chosen it for its ordinariness, for the fact that it was neither of their usual places, for the long walk across it that would give them something to do with their bodies while they said the things that didn't have chairs. They walked. Seoul moved below and around them. Hayeon had decided what she wanted to say and said it, I'm not ready to call you my best friend again. I don't know if I will be. But I'm not ready to call you nothing either. She looked at the water. I think what I want is time. Not distance. Time. I want to see who we are on the other side of this, when we're not in the middle of it. Yuna walked beside her. She did not argue. She did not offer the kind of reassurance that was really a request for reassurance. Okay, she said. And I need you to understand something, Hayeon said. What hurt me most, it wasn't him. It was you. Because I had built my life partly around knowing you were there, and you were there the whole time choosing him, and she stopped. Found the words. I need to know that the person I trust to show up for me has decided to show up for me. That's all. That's the only thing. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. I chose badly, she said. I know that. I chose the wanting over the years. And I have to live with having done that. She paused. I don't know how to prove anything to you. I just know I want the chance to. Hayeon listened. She watched the Han River, gray and wide. Then prove it quietly, she said. Over time. Without asking me to validate the effort. She glanced at her. That's what I need from you. They walked the rest of the bridge. They did not hug goodbye. They said goodbye like two women who were in the middle of something, not at the end, not at the beginning. In the careful, unromantic, genuinely hopeful middle. March arrived the way March always arrived in Seoul, without apology, without particularly caring whether you were ready for it. Hayeon was not ready. And then she was. And then she wasn't again. That was what the months after had taught her, readiness was not a destination. It was a weather system. You moved through it. She had made some changes. She had rearranged the apartment, not dramatically, but enough. The bookshelf was in a different order. She had bought a second plant for the kitchen windowsill, because the first one had been there for so long it had become part of someone else's story. The new one was hers from the start. She had been back to her therapist, she had seen one, briefly, in her late 20s, and she returned now with the specific return of someone who knows that talking to a professional is not weakness but maintenance, the same way she told her pediatric patients' parents that preventative care was not an overreaction. She applied the same logic to herself. She had been texting Yuna. Not warmly, not yet. But present, short, occasional, the specific frequency of two people testing the new weight of a relationship that had been damaged and was very slowly, on undeclared terms, determining what it could still hold. She went to the Hanol Park on a Saturday morning with no particular purpose. Cherry blossoms were out, early, this year, the kind of early that felt like a gift the city gave without announcement. She walked slowly. She had nowhere to be. She sat on a bench and looked at the blossoms and she thought, I am still here. After all of it. I am still here and the blossoms are out and I am 30 years old and I have a second plant and I am not okay every day but I am mine. I am entirely and finally mine. His name was Bae Seonu. He was a resident physician, internal medicine, third year, and he had been working the same night shifts as Hayeon for 4 months before either of them had said more than professional pleasantries. He was not the most obvious person. He was quiet in the way of someone who was listening rather than absent. He brought good coffee from the decent cafe 2 streets from the hospital and left a cup on the nursing station counter without announcement every Tuesday and Thursday, which Hayeon had noticed on week 2 and filed without comment. In November she had asked him directly, are those for anyone specific or is it general goodwill? He had looked at her with the specific expression of a man caught doing something kind. Whoever needs it, he said. Usually you look like you need it on Tuesdays. I do need it on Tuesdays, she said. I know, he said. That had been the beginning, not of something romantic, not yet, but of the kind of honest, low-stakes attention that she had learned to recognize as either the start of something or simply the gift of being noticed by a person who noticed carefully. She did not rush it. She had learned the cost of rushing. She let it be what it was, which was, for now, good coffee on Tuesdays and Thursdays and conversation in the hospital corridor that lasted longer each week, and the specific quality of a person in your day whose presence you had begun, quietly, to look forward to. She was not ready to call it anything. She was also not pretending it was nothing. That, she was learning, was the braver position. She went back to the Haeundae seawall in April. Not because of any particular reason. She had a conference in Busan and arrived a day early and walked to the sea because the sea, in her experience, was honest in a way that most things were not. She sat on the wall and watched the East Sea do what it always did, be enormous and indifferent and beautiful in its indifference, and she thought about the year that had passed. She thought about what she had learned. Not the lessons people spoke about publicly, trust yourself and you deserve better and the other true things that were also incomplete. She thought about the specific, private, unrepeatable things. She had learned that love and betrayal were not opposites. That was the thing the year had taught her most thoroughly. The people who betrayed her had loved her, imperfectly, selfishly, with terrible decisions made in the middle of it, but the love had been real alongside the damage, and carrying both truths simultaneously was harder and more honest than choosing one. She had learned that composure was not the same as strength, that she had spent years using composure as a wall and calling it character, and that the year had broken that wall down, and that what she had found behind it was not weakness but something rawer and more durable than composure had ever been. She had learned that she was capable of the long, unglamorous work of forgiving, not quickly, not completely, not in a way that erased the wound, but the work of remaining open to the people who had hurt her without returning to them as if nothing had happened. She was still texting Yuna. It was still careful. It was also real. She was still having coffee with Seonu on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It was still early. It was also something. She sat on the Haeundae seawall in April with the spring wind off the East Sea and she thought, I am not the person who said yes on the kitchen floor. I am not less than her. I am not more than her. I am what she became when the thing she had built was taken apart and she built something again, slower this time, more deliberately, with the knowledge of what foundations matter and what was decoration she had mistaken for structure. The sea moved. The sky was clear. Busan stretched behind her, alive and indifferent and full. She was 31 years old. She was not finished. She was not broken. She was not waiting. She was, at last and entirely, herself.